Okay, this video is what is the most common disease amongst doctors? All right, and the most common disease amongst doctors is functional illiteracy, which means they're able to read, but they don't read. And I also was hesitant to make this video because I said, if I make fun of doctors, I'll piss them off. The last thing I need is to make more people not like me. But I thought to myself, you know what? Nobody likes somebody who talks about a problem and doesn't offer a solution. So I'm going to do both in this video. When I say functional literacy, it means the doctors, they don't read because they're too busy and they're too tired. And so here's the treatment. I make these short newsletters, and I'm releasing a newsletter today on how to prevent diabetes, what causes insulin resistance. So you don't need to go through all these books and journal articles. All you got to do is read my newsletters for free. You just click on the email down below this video or other videos, and you can send an email, and I'll send you the newsletter once a month. Okay, this month it was how to prevent diabetes. Last month it was how to prevent dementia. Before that, it was intro to toxicology. And before that, it was, understanding cancer. All right, so anyways, the public thinks doctors are brilliant scholars with this great knowledge of science and medicine that they've been studying since they were in high school and pre-med. The reality is, I would say doctors probably have an average IQ of about 120. They usually start out with the best of intentions. They could have done a whole bunch of other things, and they decide they want to devote their life to trying to help people and becoming a doctor. They study a lot in school. They're very conscientious, and they're very much hard workers. You have to be conscientious and a hard worker, or you can't get into med school. You can't survive med school and residency. So that's built into a doctor. They're actually good people to marry, I think, in that sense, because they're kind of workaholics usually, and there's so much time working, and their spouse gets to spend their money. So I think they're good in that sense. What else about them? They tend to be very conformist because you get rewarded for that big time in medicine. You have to respect the hierarchy, and you have to conform to the standard of care guidelines, whatever they are for whatever you do, so you can generate your billing codes, make money, and stay out of trouble. As long as you follow the standard of care, it kind of doesn't really matter what happens to the patient. You follow the standard of care. But the joke is the standard of care is based on demented patients, not on patients that are able to cooperate and potentially obtain what I would call optimal care, which requires the patient has to cooperate. But anyways, that's also why people might notice that doctors tend to be very kind of conservative, formal, polite. They almost act a little dopey, which they have to do because lots of their patients are cognitively impaired. So the reason why they talk slow and kind of dopey and formal is because they don't know if the person they're talking to is not, a half-demented drug addict or elderly senile person until they've talked a little bit. Mavericks tend to not do well in medicine just because it's punished. So a lot of mavericks are secret mavericks in the sense that they keep their mouth shut because they know you're punished for doing anything original or innovative or unique or different. There are a lot of doctors with very high IQs. I know a lot of doctors, man, they're real smart. They understand things really fast. Usually what I've seen is they kind of take an attitude, well, your brain is not really welcome in medicine. What's welcome is doing your job well, or actually doing your job fast. Speed is very valued in medicine. People, patients don't really know this, but a fast doctor is highly valued by hospitals and also by colleagues because there's tons of work to do. And if somebody gets the work done fast, that makes life easier for everybody. So that is highly valued. I would actually say that's probably the most valued skill. And a lot of doctors, they don't even learn that in residency. They learn that when they're in the real world. Holy crap, there's a ton of work to do today. If you can do it fast, you will be rewarded. But that's also why patients probably notice doctors don't seem to want to talk that much as they would expect. What I've seen is most doctors are overworked. Whatever place they work for, a hospital, a clinic, gets more money if they generate more billing codes. So the pressure on them is always generate more billing codes, generate more billing codes. And for example, if they want to make partner, they better be generating enough billing codes that the group says it's worthwhile to make this person a partner, for example, in private practice. So because of that, doctors often work very long hours. And then the little time they have left over, they spend it typically with their families and on, self-care just to maintain their health, get some sleep, do their laundry, that sort of thing. Because one other thing I would say about doctors' hours, they're not like regular people's hours. A lot of people think, well, Dr. So-and-so works this shift, from, 9 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But it's not really like that. What I mean by that is a lot of times a doctor will be told, you have to cover this area, but there'll be so much work in that area, you can't cover it in a 9 to 4 shift. I don't care how fast you are and how smart you are. So that doctor will have to show up at 7:30 in the morning and they won't go home till 6 o'clock at night because there's too much work. Now, if somebody was in an other field in medicine, a technologist, a nurse, a secretary or something, they would say your shift is from 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock. But it's not like that with a doctor. That's partly why so many doctors are workaholics, because they have to do all this extra busy work, not to mention all this paperwork that makes them have to work long hours. And because of that, they have less time to read. That's why I think doctors should not be required to work. Other than special situations or some rotations that require it, in general, they probably shouldn't be working more than 4 days a week. I actually think 3 days a week would be ideal. And I say that because I know tons of doctors, and I know how massive their ignorance is. And it's because they don't have time to read and they're exhausted. And the system wants it that way. Just, match the ill to the pill and send the bill. But if a doctor is going to become really good or learn about all these other things, they need time to just sit down and read. And I do know some doctors that read. I have some doctors who do talk to me a little bit about journal articles, books they've read, interesting cases, especially the interesting cases. But it's rare. It's rare that a doctor calls me and says they read a book or calls me and says they read a journal article. Yes, it does happen. And there are some that read a lot more than others do. But it's not that common. I can tell you the vast majority of doctors I've known, and I've known many doctors for over 30 years, have never once discussed a journal article or a book with me. Okay? Again, the most common thing is interesting cases, because a lot of times interesting cases is something current in the moment. We just had this case yesterday, last week, last month. What do you think of this? And that's a lot of times why they're talking to me. They want to get my opinion. So that's why we're discussing the interesting case. But in my experience, most of them don't read hardly anything. They're exhausted, they're tired, and the little time they have left over is for their family and their self-care, which, they need to do. Everybody's got to do the laundry and get something to eat. Okay, so here are some areas, and like I said, I've got the treatment. Just look at my newsletters or watch my videos, okay? I'm going to address all the things that I know you don't know. And I know you don't know this because I talk to tons of you. I talk to medical students, residents, attendings, fellows, and stuff. I know what you know, and I know what you don't know. Okay, atherosclerosis and coronary artery disease. They don't know it. They don't know it. These are like most common causes of death, and they don't know it. All they know is cholesterol is bad when it's high. All right. These are some persons you should study if you really want to know atherosclerosis well. Walter Kempner, Nathan Pritikin, Dean Ornish, Caldwell Esselstyn, William Roberts, Gregory Sloop, and my work, just because I sort of summarized what they all did. Okay, hypertension. The book by Sloop is the best one. If you only read one thing about atherosclerosis, read the book by Gregory Sloop about cardiovascular pathophysiology and blood viscosity. That's the best book on all of atherosclerosis. Okay, hypertension. How many of them have read Kempner, Moore, Pritikin, about the epidemiology, Tada Humada, Yanomamo, Kenya? Okay, I've never met a doctor that knows this stuff. The most important thing to read if you want to learn hypertension, read Richard Moore's book, High Blood Pressure Solution. It's by far the best thing ever written on the subject of hypertension. By far. He spent his whole life, like 50 years, researching ion pumps to understand hypertension. And then he wrote this book when he in his old age about summarizing all his work, what it means. It's a masterpiece. It's beautiful. Okay, diabetes. All right, how many people have read Sweeney, Kempner, Pritikin, Brownlee, Taylor, Shulman? I can tell you, I know a lot of endocrinologists, and they're nice. I like them, and they're smart people, but in their field, there is no incentive for them to actually study diabetes. I know that sounds bizarre. I know that sounds strange, but it's absolutely true. I have talked to a lot of endocrinologists, and when I ask them questions, basic questions, what do you think of the Sweeney paper? What do you think of Kempner, Pritikin, Brownlee, Taylor, Shulman? Never once has any of them read any of these papers. Not a single one of these papers. It's amazing to me they can go through all their training and not know anything about the research on diabetes other than the medications for it, okay? It's astounding, but it's true. Okay, and I know like the smartest ones. I can tell you, I was told by a bunch of different people who are the two smartest endocrinologists, and I went and met with both of those super smart university endocrinologists, and neither one of them had read any of the papers. And they started saying bizarre things to me like, well, one of them was going to invited me to give a lecture in the fellowship program, and I'm socially kind of incompetent. I should have just shut up and I would have gone and given that lecture. But instead, I kept the conversation going and talked about some more biochemistry of diabetes, and it became readily apparent that this person did not have any idea what I was talking about. They had not read the papers, and they were embarrassed by that, so they never followed up on their invitation. So I lost that one. Like so many others. Anyways, what else about diabetes? The best paper ever written is the Michael Brownlee paper. It's a genius level paper. It's available at the American Diabetic Association site called The Unifying Theory of Diabetic Complications. If you sign into the site, you can watch the video of him giving a lecture. It's just brilliant. You know, it's like it's an academic orgasm to the maximum. I like wanted to cry when I read that paper. It's so beautiful. Okay, Roy Taylor's done great work, and he worked with Gerald Shellman over at Yale with nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy to show that the earliest detectable sign of insulin resistance is the accumulation of fat within skeletal muscle. The Gerald Shulman lecture is available on YouTube. So you just type in Gerald Shulman, MD, PhD. He won the Banting Award as best diabetes researcher in the world in 2018. Roy Taylor won it in 2012. Michael Brownlee won it in 2004. Pritikin wrote quite extensively on diabetes. He wrote a great paper where he talked about, he said almost all Americans have diabetes, and what he meant by that is if you test their blood after a high-fat meal, they'll be consistent with a diabetic, because high-fat meal causes diabetes. So that was kind of funny. Pritikin's work is available at Dr. McDougall's site. You can see like Pritikin's last legacy book, and it's a masterpiece. Of course, Kempner was reversing diabetes left and right with his low-fat rice diet. Okay, on autoimmune disease, I can tell you this. The autoimmune disease is kind of a joke in the sense that you go into these, Harvard pathophysiology textbook, the Bible of pathophysiology. Those books suck, okay? Like what, Robbins, Cutron, and Kumar. It's a piece of crap. When I was young, I admired that book. I was like, wow, this is it. This is the Bible of pathology. Now I laugh at it. It's a piece of crap. It stinks. Those guys should be ashamed of themselves. And I say that because I know a lot more about disease now than I did as a medical student. And autoimmune disease, the most important thing you know about is leaky gut. It's not even mentioned in the chapter on leaky gut, on the chapter on autoimmune disease. And I can also tell you, in my experience of talking to rheumatologists, they're quite nice. I like them. But in my experience, they don't know much about this sort of stuff, okay? There's a tendency, the pressure is always prescribed these powerful medications. And not only is leaky gut the main thing, but there's a whole bunch of related causes of autoimmune disease that are quite rare. And I haven't really spoken that much to rheumatologists. I don't talk to them that often, but from what I've seen, there's no awareness of these things. I learned all these things from just reading weird biochemistry papers, like, such and such a thing. GP, glyphosate, has glycine on it, and it substitutes out in some collagen molecules, because collagen is a triple helix with every third molecule on the protein sequence being glycine, and therefore GP can substitute in for it, and therefore GP can damage collagen. Okay, that's a weird thing. Okay, so weird things like that, distorting the shape of a protein, potentially inducing it to become autoimmune, like a damage-associated molecular patterns, okay, whereby the immune system recognizes it as a problem, so it'll cause an inflammatory response. All right, dementia. Oh, God, dementia. You talk about a slogan making people into morons. You say good fats, and every moron thinks, I've got to eat more fat. No, no, no. There are no good fats, all right? But the reason I mention that in the context of dementia is doctors are told that Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia, and that no one really knows what causes it, and no one really knows how to treat it. However, here's the recommended medicine. Probably won't work at all. It's never been shown to work at all, but we might as well give it a try. I mean, how moronic is that? Okay, and there's tons of great information on what causes dementia. We have an excellent idea of the things that cause dementia, okay? Delatorre's theory is sort of like the all-encompassing best one about the mouse equivalence, vascular hypothesis, if you will. But, the other ones are really good. Tetsumori Yamashima's theory on omega-6 cooking oils, being turned into hydroxy-nonenol toxic aldehydes, and I've got lectures on that. The Exley work on the neurotoxicity of aluminum. The Kell and Pretorius work on, the concept of leaky gut, dormant bacteria, bacterial endotoxins, subsequent amyloidogenic clotting, and effect on beta amyloid protein and prion mechanisms. Interesting stuff. And then you got my theory of Peter Rogers, MD, of neurovascular uncoupling as a cause of dementia and neuron loss through apoptosis. And also I lecture on the idea that excitotoxins, Russell Blaylock did a lot to promote the idea of excitotoxins, as did Olney. But, I also showed that, look, it's the same thing. You want to talk about a mitochondrial inhibitor, you want to talk about a SERCA inhibitor, you want to talk about an excitotoxin. And I'm actually coming to the conclusion, I'm not ready to release my latest work, but I'm doing some more additional work on that it's even more common than I thought, and I thought it was a daily super common thing. Okay, spinal degeneration. The best thing ever written on spinal degeneration is my work. Okay, there are some papers in the past saying there's an association with atherosclerosis and degenerative disc disease, but after analyzing thousands of spines, I came to the conclusion it's all the same thing. Degenerative disc disease is the same thing as DISH, diffuse idiopathic skeletal hyperostosis, and that's the same thing as Forestier's disease. And OPLL, ossification of the posterior longitudinal ligament, is the same thing. And I see it everywhere in the spine, not just cervical. And OLF is uncommon, ossification of the ligamentum flavum. And it's primarily due to ischemia, but it's also due to GP, and it's also due to F minus. And I explain the whole mechanism of that. I got videos about it. I wrote a book about it. Cancer. Obviously you got to know about Otto Warburg. Okay, if you don't know Otto Warburg, you don't know anything about cancer. You should know the metabolic theory of cancer. And the best description of it came in the book by Travis Christofferson called Tripping Over the Truth. That's a great introductory book. But then he kind of goes off the deep end in his recommendations on what to do about it, but it's a great book. Seyfried, he did great work studying the metabolic theory of cancer. Basically, until you know the metabolic theory of cancer, you really can't make sense out of it. Peterson did a lot of great work on figuring out the mechanisms of a cell converting into running on anaerobic glycolysis, with hexokinase and whatnot. So he did a lot of great work. You want to understand the Michael Brownlee paper. Again, that was a landmark paper on diabetes, but you almost have to know the Brownlee paper in order to make sense out of why mitochondrial injury causes cancer. It's a long story. Obviously, it can lead to running on anaerobic glycolysis, but it just helps to know that paper. That paper is like I said, it's like the best paper ever written on diabetes, and it gives you good insight into mitochondria. Okay, and then I summarized a ton of stuff about the biochemistry of cancer. I went all over the place to find all the sources of it and all the people, and then I wrote the book Poor Man's Way to Fight Cancer. So that kind of summarizes it all in one place. My newsletters. Oh, I did make a newsletter about that. This guy, Kim Williams, famous cardiologist, he's the head of the American Society of Cardiology at one time. He wrote, there are two types of doctors, vegans and those who have not read the nutritional literature. So what I would say is if you have any docs out there, if you're a doctor yourself, my newsletters will summarize this stuff pretty quickly, so will my videos. And there's other YouTube videos out there that you can learn all this stuff from. And a way you can learn this stuff, like a lot of times what I do is when I'm eating dinner, I just watch a video. And you'll learn a lot, okay? Some of the highest yield ones would be Dr. McDougall, myself, Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. T. Colin Campbell, and there's other really good doctors out there. There's other really good nutrition vegan websites out there. Search around and you will be surprised how much good information there is on the internet. And don't fall for the low-carb, keto, paleo, carnivore nonsense. That's all a bunch of nonsense just to trick people and keep them fat and sick. So, also, the other thing I would say is if I had to look at, categories of knowledge, conventional medicine, basically, your knowledge of nutrition and toxicology is a joke. You don't have any. But that's easy to fix, okay? The vegan community, I think, is very good on nutrition. The low-fat vegan community. Low-fat's the way to go. The high-fat stuff's all nonsense. And then the third thing is, though, not to brag, but I think it's true, I've taken it to a higher level because not only do I teach the nutrition, I teach the biochemistry of the nutrition, and I also teach toxicology. And that's because I'm interested in the brain, and the brain is far more fussy than is the heart. Most of the nutrition community just says, well, you eat low-fat vegan, your heart's going to be fine, you're set. But I would say, oh no, you want to be careful because you need to know about toxicology because some people still can't lose the weight, and I think it's because of these estrogenic chemicals in particular, but I go through a lot of other stuff. Look at all these people from India who are skinny, but they still got diabetes, and I think it's because of the omega-6 cooking oils, and I learned that idea from Dr. Yamashima. So anyways, hope this will help you. Just click on the email and send me a request for the newsletter, and I'll send you a newsletter once a month. And that's a fast way to help yourself stay informed on this stuff.